The sound of shattering glass was what I remembered most, not the pain, not the screams that followed, but that distinct crystalline explosion as the bullet tore through the window of Antonio's, where I'd been working double shifts for the past 18 months. My name is Emma Collins, and until that Tuesday evening in October, I was nobody. Just another exhausted waitress with calloused feet and permanent coffee stains on her fingers, invisible to the people I served day in and day out. The kind of face you forget the moment I turn away from your table. I'd been surviving, not living, in a small apartment that smelled perpetually of my neighbor's cooking, a mixture of garlic and something else I couldn't quite identify. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every fight, every reconciliation, every moment of passion. It was a constant reminder of how alone I was in this city. That evening had been unusually busy at Antonio's. The rain had been falling steadily since morning, drumming against the windows, creating rivulets that distorted the streetlights outside. The restaurant smelled of garlic bread and tomato sauce, warm and comforting against the chill that seeped in every time someone opened the door. I was balancing 3 plates of pasta when he walked in. I didn't know who he was then. Not really. But something in the atmosphere changed, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. Conversations dimmed. The clink of silverware against plates became more deliberate, more cautious. He didn't come in alone. First, a man with shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway entered, scanning the restaurant with eyes that missed nothing. Then another, standing on the opposite side of the door. Only then did he step inside, tall, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent. His dark hair was combed back, revealing a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Table 7 just opened up, Emma," my manager whispered, suddenly beside me, his voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "Take care of them." I nodded, delivered my pasta plates, and grabbed fresh menus. As I approached their table, I noticed how other patrons averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their meals or their phones. No one wanted to be caught looking. The broad-shouldered men sat facing the door in the main dining area, leaving the third chair, the one with its back to the wall, for him. He unbuttoned his suit jacket as he sat, a movement so elegant it seemed choreographed. A flash of gold caught my eye. A watch that probably cost more than everything I owned. "Good evening," I said, my standard greeting feeling suddenly inadequate. "Welcome to Antonio's." He looked up then, and I felt it like a physical touch, those eyes taking my measure in a single glance. Not in the way men typically looked at me, assessing my body or my availability. This was different, clinical, as if determining my worth in some marketplace I didn't know existed. "Water for the table," he said, his voice a low rumble with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. "And your best Barolo," I nodded, turning to leave, when his hand caught my wrist. His touch was light, but irrefutable, like being caught in a gentle trap. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded when my pulse was racing beneath his fingers. "Emma," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Bring 3 glasses." It wasn't until I was halfway to the bar that I realized he hadn't looked at the menu, hadn't asked about specials, had barely acknowledged the existence of food at all. Whatever brought him to Antonio's, it wasn't our mediocre pasta. I delivered their wine with hands that trembled slightly. He noticed. Those eyes missed nothing, but said nothing. Just nodded his thanks and turned to his companions, effectively dismissing me. They spoke in low voices, switching occasionally to what sounded like Italian, falling silent whenever I approached the table. The night progressed, the rain intensified, and I moved between my tables on autopilot, hyper-aware of his presence even when my back was turned. It felt like standing near a predator. Your body knows, even when your mind is occupied elsewhere. It was nearing closing time when it happened. The front door opened, letting in a gust of cold, rain-scented air. I turned, ready to tell whoever it was that the kitchen was closed, when I saw them. 2 men in dark jackets, their faces hard, eyes scanning the nearly empty restaurant until they found what they were looking for. Time slowed. I saw one man's hand slide beneath his jacket, Saw the recognition flash across the face of one of my customer's bodyguards. Saw the dark-eyed man start to turn in his seat, too slowly. I don't know why I did it. Some dormant instinct, perhaps. Or maybe just the sudden, crystal-clear certainty that death had entered the room and was heading for table 7. "Get down!" I screamed, lunging forward. The sound came then, not the dramatic bang of movies, but something flatter, more final. A punctuation mark at the end of my ordinary life. I felt the impact before the pain, like being punched hard in the side. The force spun me around, sent me crashing against his table, wine glasses toppling, the precious Barolo spreading like blood across the white tablecloth. His eyes met mine as I fell, wide with something that might have been surprise. The world tilted sideways as I hit the floor. More sounds followed, shouts, another of those flat cracks, the crash of a chair. Then he was there, kneeling beside me, his expensive suit pressed against the dirty restaurant floor. His hands moved to my side, applying pressure. The pain bloomed then, hot and insistent. "Foolish girl," he murmured, but there was no anger in his voice, only a strange wonder. "Why would you do that?" I tried to answer, but my mouth tasted of copper. I watched as his pristine white shirt turned red beneath his jacket, my blood on his hands, his clothes. "Stay with me, Emma," he commanded, as if death were something I could decline if he ordered it so. "Marco, get the car!" The ceiling of Antonio's spun above me, the patterns in the plaster swirling like stars. His face remained in focus, though, those dark eyes intent on mine as if memorizing me. "I didn't even know your name," I managed to say, the words bubbling strangely in my throat. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Matteo," he said. "Matteo Russo." The name meant nothing to me then. I didn't know I'd crossed paths with the most dangerous man in the city. Didn't know that Matteo Russo controlled everything from the docks to City Hall. Didn't know that saving his life had irrevocably entangled mine with his. I just knew that his arms were unexpectedly gentle as he lifted me from the floor, cradling me against his chest as if I weighed nothing. The last thing I remember is the rain on my face as he carried me out into the night, his heartbeat strong and steady against my cheek, his voice giving orders I couldn't understand. I woke to the scent of roses and the distant beeping of medical equipment. For a moment, I thought I was in a hospital, but the room around me was all wrong, spacious and elegant, with cream-colored walls and heavy curtains drawn against the sunlight. The bed beneath me was soft and enormous, the sheets finer than anything I'd ever touched. I tried to sit up and gasped as pain lanced through my side. Looking down, I saw I was wearing a silk nightgown I didn't recognize, the fabric sliding cool against my skin. Beneath it, bandages wrapped my torso. "You shouldn't move yet," a voice said, and I turned to find a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform standing by the door. "The doctor said you need to rest." "Where am I?" My voice was a rasp. "This isn't a hospital. Mr. Russo's residence," she replied, moving to pour water from a crystal decanter on the bedside table. "I'm Mrs. Abernathy, the housekeeper. You've been here for 3 days. 3 days?" I echoed, accepting the water with a shaking hand. "But my job, my apartment, all taken care of," she said, her tone making it clear that questions about the specifics would not be welcomed. "Mr. Russo has seen to everything." Before I could ask what that meant, the door opened again, and he was there, Matteo Russo, looking even more imposing in daylight. He'd traded the suit for a cashmere sweater and tailored pants that did nothing to diminish his aura of contained power. "Leave us," he told Mrs. Abernathy, who immediately complied, closing the door behind her. He approached the bed slowly, as if giving me time to adjust to his presence. Up close, I could see faint lines around his eyes, putting him in his late 30s, perhaps. His features were even more striking than I remembered, or perhaps it was just seeing them without the haze of pain and blood loss. "How are you feeling, Emma?" he asked, taking the chair beside my bed. "Confused," I answered honestly. "Why am I here? Why not a hospital?" A shadow crossed his face. "Hospitals ask questions, file reports. The men who came for me won't stop looking." "Those men, they wanted to kill you?" The memory of that moment crystallized, the intent in their eyes, the flash of metal. "Yes." He studied me intently. Which brings me to my question. Why did you do it? Why take a bullet meant for me? I shook my head slightly. I didn't think. I just reacted. You saved my life. He stated it as a simple fact. A life few would consider worth saving. I don't understand. His smile was brief and without humor. No, I don't imagine you do. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Do you know who I am, Emma? I stared at him. This stranger who'd brought me to his home, whose blood-soaked image had haunted my dreams for 3 days. You're Matteo Russo, I said, the name falling awkwardly from my lips. He waited, clearly expecting more. When I offered nothing else, something like surprise flickered across his face. You truly don't know. It wasn't a question. He leaned back in his chair, regarding me with renewed curiosity. Perhaps that explains it. Explains what? Why you would risk your life for mine. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to draw back the heavy curtains. Sunlight flooded the room, momentarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, I saw we were high above the city, the view stretching out to the harbor and beyond. Not just any building then, one of those luxury high-rises I'd only ever seen from a distance. My family has interests throughout this city, he said, his back to me as he gazed out at the skyline. Business interests that sometimes create enemies. The careful way he chose his words told me more than the words themselves. The hushed conversations at Antonio's when he entered, the bodyguards, the men with guns. A cold understanding began to seep through me. You're in the Mafia, I said quietly. He turned, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. That's a simplistic term. I prefer to think of myself as a businessman who operates outside conventional limitations. My heartbeat quickened. I was alone in a strange place with a man who'd just admitted, in the most elegant terms possible, that he was a criminal. A man powerful enough to inspire assassination attempts in public places. Am I a prisoner here? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. He moved back to my bedside, and I had to resist the urge to shrink away from him. No, Emma. You're under my protection. There's a difference. I want to go home. The men who came for me at Antonio's know your face now, he said, his tone gentle but unyielding. They know you interfered. They're not the forgiving type. So I am a prisoner, I insisted, just in a nicer cage than they'd put me in. Something that might have been admiration flickered across his face. You have spirit. Good. You'll need it. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something woody and expensive. Let me be clear, Emma. I owe you a debt. In my world, that means something. You're here because it's the safest place for you, but also because I protect what's mine. I'm not yours, I said, even as heat rushed to my face. His smile was slow and certain. You became mine the moment you took that bullet. The moment your blood stained my hands. He reached out, one finger tracing the air just above my cheek, not quite touching. I take care of what belongs to me. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through me, one I wasn't ready to examine. How long? I asked, changing the subject. How long do I have to stay here? Until I eliminate the threat, he replied, as casually as someone might discuss eliminating a pest problem. My men are working on it. And my life? My job? My apartment? As Mrs. Abernathy said, it's been handled. Antonio's believes you're recovering with family after your accident. Your rent has been paid for the next 6 months. Your belongings are being packed and brought here. The casual way he'd rearranged my entire existence in 3 days left me speechless. What kind of power did this man wield, that he could make decisions about my life without even consulting me? I don't want your charity, I finally managed. It's not charity, Emma. It's compensation. And protection. He stood, straightening his sleeves in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. Rest now. The doctor will check on you this evening. We'll talk more when you're stronger. He moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back at me. One more thing. There are guards outside this room and at every entrance to this building. For your safety, don't attempt to leave without escort. With that, he was gone. leaving me alone with the realization that my life as I knew it had ended the moment I'd shouted those 2 words in Antonio's. The next few days passed in a haze of pain medication and fitful sleep. The doctor, a quiet, efficient man who never introduced himself and asked few questions, visited daily to check my wound and adjust my medication. Mrs. Abernathy brought meals on silver trays and helped me to the adjoining bathroom, her manner professional but distant. Of Matteo, I saw nothing. By the 5th day, I was strong enough to move around the room on my own, though the wound in my side pulled painfully with each step. I explored my gilded cage, a suite larger than my entire apartment, with a bathroom that featured a shower big enough for 4 people and a tub that could have served as a small pool. The closet held an array of new clothing in my size, the tags still attached to most items. Designer names I recognized from magazines but had never dreamed of wearing. Next to them hung a few familiar pieces, my worn jeans and faded t-shirts looking shabby and out of place among the silks and cashmeres. On the 7th day, when I was beginning to wonder if Matteo had forgotten about me entirely, the door opened to reveal not Mrs. Abernathy with my lunch, but a young woman approximately my age. She was striking, tall and willowy, with auburn hair pulled into an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. "You must be Emma," she said, her smile warm but assessing. "I'm Sophia, Matteo's sister. I've been dying to meet you." "His sister?" I echoed stupidly. "Don't look so surprised. Even monsters have families." She laughed at my expression. That was a joke, mostly. She glided into the room, perching on the edge of the bed where I sat. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I said cautiously. Though I'd feel even better if someone would tell me what's going on. Sophia tilted her head, studying me with eyes that reminded me of her brother's, dark and intelligent, missing nothing. "Matteo hasn't been by to see you?" "Not since the first day." Something like understanding crossed her face. He's keeping his distance. Interesting." Before I could ask what she meant, she continued, "Well, I'm here to spring you from this room, at least. Matteo says you're well enough to join us for dinner tonight." "Us?" "The family," she clarified. "Nothing formal. Just me, Matteo, our younger brother Dante, and our uncle Salvatore." The thought of facing a room full of Russos, a room full of people who were undoubtedly just as dangerous as Matteo, sent a wave of anxiety through me. "I don't think—" "It wasn't a request," Sophia interrupted, though her tone remained friendly. "Besides, you must be going stir-crazy in here, and I've brought reinforcements." She gestured to the door, where a middle-aged man waited with what appeared to be a garment bag. "This is Paolo. He's a miracle worker with hair and makeup." "I don't need—" "Trust me," she said, standing. "For your first dinner with the family, you want all the armor you can get." She smiled at my expression. Another joke. Sort of. As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Sophia? Why did your brother save me? Why bring me here instead of just leaving me?" She paused at the door, her expression softening. "You saved his life, Emma. In our world, that creates a bond. A sacred one." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "And Matteo, he doesn't form bonds easily. When he does, he holds on tight, too tight, some might say." With that cryptic comment, she was gone, leaving me with Paolo and a growing sense that I had stumbled into something far more complex than a simple act of reciprocal protection. Hours later, I stood before the mirror, barely recognizing myself. Paolo had indeed worked miracles. My usually unruly brown hair fell in soft waves past my shoulders, my makeup subtle but transformative. The dress Sophia had selected was a deep burgundy that complemented my pale skin, the cut modest but undeniably flattering. "Beautiful," Mrs. Abernathy approved from the doorway. "They're waiting for you in the dining room." My heart hammered against my ribs as I followed her through the penthouse. The place was even more impressive than I'd imagined, all sleek lines and understated luxury, with art pieces that looked museum-worthy and furniture that probably cost more than a year's salary at Antonio's. The dining room overlooked the city, the lights just beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. 4 people turned as I entered. Sophia, smiling encouragingly, an older man with silver at his temples who had to be Uncle Salvatore. A younger man with a boyish face that didn't quite match his watchful eyes. And Matteo. He stood as I entered, and for a moment, something raw and unguarded flashed across his face, something that looked almost like hunger. Then his expression smoothed into polite appreciation. "Emma," he said, my name a caress in his mouth. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm feeling much better." Matteo pulled out the chair beside his own. "Join us." It wasn't a request. I crossed the room, conscious of every eye on me, and took my seat. Up close, Matteo was even more devastating in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, a subtle scent of sandalwood surrounding him. He'd been handsome in my memory, but seeing him now, collected, commanding in his element, he was breathtaking. "So, this is the waitress with the remarkable reflexes," the older man said, his accent thicker than Matteo's. "I'm Salvatore Russo, the family patriarch, though my nephew here seems to forget that sometimes." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Uncle," Matteo acknowledged with the barest hint of deference. "Emma saved my life. She deserves our hospitality." Of course. Salvatore waved a hand. "And we're grateful, aren't we, Dante?" The younger man, who couldn't have been more than 25, nodded, studying me with undisguised curiosity. "Absolutely. Not many civilians would jump in front of a bullet for a stranger." His tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of my motives. "I didn't think," I said honestly. "It was instinct." "The purest kind of bravery," Sophia interjected, raising her wineglass in my direction. "To Emma, our guardian angel." As the others raised their glasses, I felt Matteo's gaze on me, intense and searching. I took a hasty sip of the wine, something red and likely ridiculously expensive, to hide my discomfort. Dinner was an elaborate affair, course after course of exquisite food served by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The conversation flowed around me, sometimes in English, sometimes in rapid-fire Italian that I couldn't follow. Business talk, I gathered, though carefully coded. "Tell me, Emma," Salvatore said during a lull. "What do you know about our family?" I set down my fork carefully. "Very little. I know Matteo has business interests throughout the city." Dante snorted into his wineglass, earning a sharp look from his brother. "Indeed," Salvatore continued, ignoring the interruption. "The Russo family has been a fixture in this city for 3 generations. We've built an empire." His eyes, shrewd and calculating, never left my face. "An empire with many enemies." "Uncle," Matteo's voice held a warning. "She should know what she's involved in." Salvatore replied mildly. "The Conte family, for instance. They've been trying to move in on our territory for years. The men who came for Matteo at that restaurant? Conte soldiers." He leaned forward. "They won't stop, you know, not until they've eliminated the threat Matteo poses to their expansion." My appetite vanished, and I'm a target now too, potentially, Salvatore agreed, as if we were discussing something as mundane as the weather. "Though they might see you as leverage rather than a threat. A way to get to Matteo." "That's enough," Matteo said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Emma doesn't need to concern herself with these matters. Doesn't she?" Salvatore raised an eyebrow. "The girl took a bullet for you, Matteo. She's in this whether she wants to be or not." A tense silence fell over the table. Sophia shot me a sympathetic glance, while Dante seemed to be enjoying the undercurrent of conflict. "The situation with the Contes is being handled," Matteo finally said. "Emma is under my protection until it's resolved." The possessive note in his voice sent a shiver down my spine, and after? I couldn't stop myself from asking, "What happens to me when it's resolved?" 4 pairs of eyes turned to me, and I instantly regretted speaking. But I'd come too far to back down now. "What happens to my life?" I pressed. "Do I just go back to Antonio's like nothing happened?" Matteo's expression was unreadable. "We'll discuss your future privately. I think the girl deserves an answer," Salvatore said, an edge of amusement in his voice. "After all, she's given up quite a lot for you already, hasn't she?" Something dangerous flashed in Matteo's eyes. "Uncle, with respect, this doesn't concern you." "Everything that affects this family concerns me," Salvatore replied, his jovial tone belied by the hardness in his eyes. And your interest in this young woman definitely affects the family. I looked between them, sensing currents I couldn't fully understand. There was history here, tension that had nothing to do with me but that my presence seemed to exacerbate. Perhaps we should move to the lounge for dessert, Sophia suggested, clearly trying to diffuse the situation. An excellent idea, Salvatore agreed, rising from his chair. Emma, you must try the tiramisu. Family recipe. As the others moved toward the door, Matteo caught my arm, holding me back. A moment, he said, his voice low. We stood in silence until the others had left, his hand warm around my wrist, his thumb unconsciously tracing circles against my pulse point. I apologize for my uncle, he said finally. He can be direct. At least someone's being direct with me, I replied. You've kept me in the dark since I got here. His jaw tightened. I've been busy ensuring your safety. By avoiding me? By eliminating threats, he countered. The Conte family doesn't forgive or forget. What you did at Antonio's, he broke off, seeming to struggle with something. You have no idea what you've stepped into, Emma. Then tell me, I insisted. I deserve to know. He released my wrist and moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. The man you saved isn't someone worth saving, he said quietly. I've done things you couldn't imagine. Things that would make you run from me if you knew. I'm not naive, I said. Though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. I know what your business interests probably entail. He turned back to me, his expression grave. No, you don't. And that innocence. He stepped closer. Close enough that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. That's what I'm trying to preserve. By keeping me prisoner in a gilded cage? By keeping you alive, he corrected sharply. Then more softly. By keeping you untainted by my world for as long as possible. Something in his tone made my heart race. You talk as if I'll be in your world indefinitely. His eyes, dark and intense, held mine. You crossed a line when you saved me, Emma. There's no going back to your old life. Not completely. Fear and something else, something I wasn't ready to name, twisted in my stomach. That's not your decision to make, isn't it? He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. You bound yourself to me the moment you took that bullet. A life for a life. In my world, that creates a debt that can never truly be repaid. I shivered at his touch, hating my body's response to his proximity. I don't want your debt. What do you want, Emma? His voice had dropped to a near whisper. The question caught me off guard. What did I want? To go back to my dingy apartment and my dead-end job? To return to a life where I was invisible? Forgettable? The truth was, despite the danger and uncertainty, part of me had come alive in this strange new world, a part I hadn't known existed. My voice faltered. I want to understand why you care what happens to me. Why not just have your doctor patch me up and send me on my way with enough money to buy my silence? Why all of this? I gestured around us, at the opulent room, the new clothes, the care I'd been given. Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Because when I looked into your eyes as you lay bleeding on that restaurant floor, I saw something I recognized. His hand moved to my face, cupping my cheek. Something I thought I'd never find. My breath caught. What? Someone who would sacrifice themselves for another without calculation. Without agenda. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, sending electricity coursing through me. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world, Emma? How precious? I couldn't look away from him, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The intensity in his gaze held me captive more effectively than any locked door. Matteo, are you coming? Dante's breaking out the good brandy. Sophia's voice shattered the moment. He stepped back, his hand falling away from my face. His expression shuddering closed once more. We should join the others, he said, his voice carefully neutral again. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and followed him from the dining room, my mind racing with everything he'd said, and everything he hadn't. The evening progressed in a blur of rich dessert, expensive alcohol, and carefully maintained small talk. Salvatore told stories of Matteo's childhood that made Sofia laugh and Matteo scowl. Dante flirted harmlessly with me, earning sharp glances from his brother that he seemed to deliberately ignore. Through it all, I felt Matteo's awareness of me like a physical touch, his eyes following me when he thought I wouldn't notice, his body angling toward mine whenever I spoke. Whatever connection had flared between us in the dining room remained, humming like a live wire beneath the surface of our polite interactions. It was after midnight when Salvatore finally rose to leave, kissing Sofia on both cheeks and clapping Dante on the shoulder. When he reached Matteo, he embraced him in a way that seemed both affectionate and calculating. "Remember what we discussed," he murmured, just loud enough for me to overhear. "Family comes first, always." Matteo's expression gave nothing away, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Good night, Uncle." As Salvatore turned to me, I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. A calculation, an assessment, that made my skin crawl. "Good night, Emma. I expect we'll be seeing much more of each other." Block 4. After Salvatore left, the atmosphere in the room lightened perceptibly. Sofia kicked off her heels and curled up on the sofa, while Dante poured himself another brandy. Matteo remained standing, his posture still rigid, eyes distant as if his mind were elsewhere. "Well, that was relatively painless," Sofia remarked, giving me a sympathetic smile. "Uncle Sal was on his best behavior tonight." "That was his best behavior?" I asked, unable to hide my disbelief. Dante laughed, a sound surprisingly boyish from someone I was beginning to realize was far more dangerous than his youthful appearance suggested. "Oh, Emma, you have no idea. Usually, he spends the entire dinner reminding Matteo of his failures and questioning his leadership. Dante..." Matteo's voice held a warning. "What?" "She's going to figure it out eventually." Dante dropped onto the sofa beside his sister. "Uncle Sal thinks Matteo's too soft to lead the family business. Too, what's the word he uses? Sentimental." I glanced at Matteo, trying to reconcile the words soft and sentimental with the hard, controlled man before me. His face revealed nothing, but I noticed his hands, those elegant, powerful hands, had curled into fists at his sides. "I think Emma's had enough family politics for one night," Sofia interjected gently. "Why don't we talk about something else, like what we're going to do with her now that she's up and about?" "Do with me?" I echoed. "You can't stay cooped up in that room forever," Sofia explained. "And since you'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future..." "I haven't agreed to that," I interrupted. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of surprise and amusement. "Oh, honey," Sofia said, her tone almost pitying. "It's not really a choice." "Of course it's a choice," I insisted, a flush of anger warming my cheeks. "I'm grateful for the medical care and protection, but I have a life to get back to." "Had," Dante corrected, swirling his brandy. Past tense. "That life is over, Emma. The moment you stepped in front of that bullet, you became part of this." He gestured vaguely around him. "Our world." "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just reacted. I didn't even know who he was, which makes what you did even more remarkable." Matteo spoke at last, his voice quiet but commanding enough to silence the room. "And all the more reason why you can't simply return to your old life." "Because the Conte family will come after me," I said, remembering Salvatore's warning. "Yes," Matteo agreed, moving toward me, "but also because I won't allow it." The possessiveness in his voice should have angered me further. Instead, it sent a treacherous shiver down my spine. "You won't allow it?" "Matteo," Sofia's voice held a note of caution. "Perhaps this conversation should happen privately." "No," I said firmly. "I want to understand exactly what's going on here. All of you seem to have plans for my future that no one's bothering to share with me." Matteo studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. "You're right," he finally said. "You deserve to know." He turned to his siblings. "Leave us." Neither Sofia nor Dante argued, though Sofia squeezed my hand reassuringly as she passed. "Don't let him intimidate you," she whispered. "He respects strength." When we were alone, Matteo moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of something amber. He handed one to me, then gestured to the sofa. "Sit, please." I took the drink, but remained standing. "I'd rather hear whatever you have to say directly." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "As you wish." He took a sip of his drink, seeming to gather his thoughts. The Conte family and the Russo family have been rivals for generations. A cold war, for the most part. Territorial disputes, business competition, the occasional skirmish. But recently things have escalated. Why? Because I've been changing how we do business, he said simply. Moving away from certain traditional revenue streams, legitimizing our holdings. The Contes see it as weakness, an opportunity to move in on what they consider vulnerable territory. And the men at Antonio's? A direct challenge. A public assassination would send a message to our allies and enemies alike, that the Russos are vulnerable, that I can be touched. His expression darkened. What you did disrupted that narrative. A waitress with no connection to me or my family, willing to risk her life for mine. It confused them, made them cautious. "So I'm useful to you," I said, understanding dawning. "A shield, a symbol." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're much more than that, Emma." My heart quickened. "What am I then?" "A complication," he admitted. "One I never expected." He set down his glass and reached for mine, his fingers brushing against mine as he took it and placed it beside his own. "You should know that I've had you investigated thoroughly since that night. Your childhood in foster care after your parents' accident, your struggle to make ends meet, the 3 jobs you worked to pay off your student loans for a degree you never finished." I stiffened, violated by this invasion of my privacy. "You had no right." "I had every right," he countered. "I needed to know who you were, if you had connections to my enemies, if your heroism was part of some elaborate plot." "And what did you find?" I asked bitterly. "That I'm just a nobody, a waitress with too much debt and not enough sense to mind her own business?" "I found," he said, his voice softening, "a woman of remarkable courage and integrity. Someone who's been fighting her entire life, even when the odds were stacked against her." He took another step closer. "Someone who reminded me of who I once wanted to be, before this life hardened me." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. "What does that have to do with keeping me here? With telling me I can't go back to my life? The Contis know your face now. They've undoubtedly discovered your identity, your history, just as I did. They'll use you to get to me, either as bait or as a message." Fear coiled in my stomach. "By killing me. Or worse," he said grimly. "The men who work for Enzo Conte are not known for their restraint or mercy, especially with women." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. "So I stay here, under your protection. For how long?" "Until the threat is eliminated." "And how do you plan to eliminate it?" More violence, more bloodshed. Something hard and cold settled over his features. "This is my world, Emma. I don't expect you to understand it or approve of it." "You're right. I don't." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze directly. "But I'm not naive enough to think there's an easy way out of this situation either. So here's my proposal. I'll stay, under your protection, until this Conte threat is resolved. But I want something in return." His eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise and perhaps admiration crossing his face. "You're negotiating with me?" "I'm establishing boundaries," I corrected. "If I'm going to be part of your world, even temporarily, I need to have some control over my own life." He considered me for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. "What are your terms?" "I want to work," I said firmly. "Not at Antonio's, obviously, but somewhere. I need purpose, routine. I can't just sit in that room all day waiting for someone to try to kill me." A faint smile touched his lips. "Reasonable. What else?" "Information," I continued, emboldened by his willingness to listen. "I want to know what's happening, with the Contis, with the threat to me, with your plans. No more being kept in the dark." His expression grew more guarded. "Some information would put you at risk." "I'm already at risk," I pointed out. "Knowledge at least gives me some power in this situation." He nodded slowly. "Within limits, I can agree to that. Anything else? I hesitated, then decided to push my luck. Freedom to leave when this is over. A new identity if necessary, somewhere the Contis can't find me. A chance to build a life away from all of this. Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. If that's what you truly want when the time comes, he said, his voice carefully neutral, I won't stop you. Then we have a deal? We do. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I placed mine in it. His grip was warm and firm, his skin surprisingly calloused for a man who wore such expensive suits. But I have one condition of my own. Which is? Your safety is non-negotiable, he said, his fingers tightening around mine. If I give an order regarding your protection, you follow it without question, no matter what. The intensity in his eyes made it clear this wasn't a point he would compromise on. Agreed, I said quietly. He released my hand, though he seemed reluctant to do so. Then it settled. Starting tomorrow, Mrs. Abernathy will show you around the penthouse. You'll have access to most areas, though my office and certain other rooms will remain off-limits. My security team will brief you on protocols. And I'll speak to Sophia about finding you suitable work within one of our legitimate businesses. Thank you, I said, meaning it despite the strangeness of the situation. He picked up our abandoned drinks, handing mine back to me. To new arrangements, he said, raising his glass slightly. I clinked my glass against his, acutely aware of his eyes on me as I took a sip. The liquor burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from within. One more thing, Emma, he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that seemed to resonate directly in my chest. The debt between us, the life debt. It doesn't expire when the Conte threat is eliminated. In my world, such a debt is binding, permanent. I swallowed hard, understanding the implication. Meaning? Meaning that wherever you go, whatever life you build, you will always be under my protection. Always be. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, connected to me. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through my body, a reaction I couldn't quite understand or control. Is that a threat or a promise? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His smile was slow and knowing, as if he could read every confused emotion crossing my face. That, Emma, he said softly, is entirely up to you. The following weeks unfolded with surprising speed, each day drawing me deeper into Matteo's world, despite my determination to maintain some distance. True to his word, he arranged for me to work at the Russo Foundation, a legitimate charitable organization that, I quickly learned, served both as a genuine philanthropic enterprise and a convenient means of laundering money. My position as an administrative assistant to Sophia, who ran the foundation with surprising passion and competence, gave me purpose and structure. The work itself was rewarding, organizing scholarship programs for underprivileged youth, coordinating food distribution in the city's poorest neighborhoods, arranging fundraising events that the city's elite clamored to attend. Does it bother you? I asked Sophia one afternoon as we sorted through scholarship applications. Knowing where some of this money comes from? She looked up from the file she was reviewing, her expression thoughtful. The source doesn't change the good it does, she said simply. These kids don't care if their college tuition comes from gambling profits or protection money. They just care that they have a future now. I couldn't argue with her logic, though the moral ambiguity still troubled me. It was one of many compromises I found myself making as I adjusted to life in Matteo's orbit. Living in his penthouse created an intimacy I hadn't anticipated. Though I'd been moved to my own suite across the hall from his, we shared meals, spaces, moments of unexpected domesticity. I'd find him in the kitchen at midnight, making espresso in silence. He'd discover me in his library, curled up with a first edition Hemingway, small intersections that gradually softened the edges between us. True to his promise, Matteo kept me informed about the ongoing situation with the Conte family. Strategic business acquisitions designed to cut off their revenue streams. Negotiations with mutual allies to isolate them politically. Occasional flashes of violence, a warehouse fire, a shooting outside a nightclub, that he mentioned with clinical detachment while I tried to reconcile this cold strategist with the man who brought me tea when I couldn't sleep. Through it all, there remained an unspoken current between us, a tension that neither of us acknowledged, but that grew stronger with each passing day. His eyes lingered on me across rooms. My breath caught when his hand brushed mine in passing. We circled each other like planets locked in mutual orbit, neither willing to close the distance, both unable to break away. Until the night everything changed. I was returning from a late meeting at the foundation, accompanied by Marco, the taciturn bodyguard who had become my constant shadow. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse foyer, and immediately I sensed something was wrong. The usual guards were absent from their posts. The air felt charged, heavy with threat. "Stay behind me," Marco ordered, drawing his weapon with practiced ease. We moved cautiously into the main living area, finding it empty, but clearly disturbed. A shattered glass on the floor, a chair overturned. My heart began to race. "Mr. Russo?" Marco called out, his voice tense. A low groan came from the direction of Matteo's office, a room I'd never entered, respecting his private domain. Marco pushed open the door, gun raised, then immediately lowered it. "Boss," he breathed, rushing forward. I followed, freezing in the doorway at the sight before me. The elegant office was in disarray, papers scattered, furniture overturned. And Matteo, powerful, invincible Matteo, slumped in his desk chair, blood staining his white shirt crimson, his face alarmingly pale. "Emma," he said, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. "You shouldn't be here." I ignored him, rushing to his side. "What happened? Who did this?" "Conte's men." He grimaced as Marco helped him sit straighter. "Got past security somehow. Professional job. We need to get you to a hospital," I insisted, pressing my hand to the wound in his shoulder, feeling his warm blood seep through my fingers. "No hospitals," he said firmly. "Too many questions. Too exposed." "He's right," Marco agreed. "I'll call the doctor. Same one who treated you." As Marco stepped away to make the call, I kept pressure on Matteo's wound, fighting back the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. How did they get in? Matteo's eyes, though clouded with pain, remained sharp. Inside help. Someone gave them access codes, security protocols. Who would... I began. Then understanding dawned. Salvatore. A bitter smile twisted Matteo's lips. My uncle has always had strong opinions about how this family should be run, and who should be running it. He tried to have you killed. The betrayal seemed incomprehensible to me, though I recalled the tension between them at dinner, Salvatore's parting words. "Family comes first, always." "He tried to have me removed," Matteo corrected. "The Conte men were hired guns, but the plan was Salvatore's. Fortunately, they were in a hurry. Sloppy. His hand covered mine where it pressed against his wound, his skin burning hot. "I've survived worse." "Boss?" Marco returned, his expression grave. "Doctor's on his way, but we have another problem. Ms. Sophia and Mr. Dante have been taken." The color drained from Matteo's face. "What?" "Your siblings were at the downtown restaurant. Conte's men grabbed them 20 minutes ago. We just got word." Matteo surged to his feet, swaying dangerously. I caught him, struggling under his weight. "I have to get them back," he growled. "You're in no condition," I began. "They're my family." He cut me off, his eyes burning with a fury I'd never seen before. "I won't leave them in Conte's hands. Not for a minute." I recognized the futility of arguing. "Then I'm coming with you." His eyes met mine, surprise momentarily replacing the pain and rage. "Absolutely not. You can barely stand," I pointed out. "And you said yourself I'm already a target. At least together we have a better chance." Marco looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with both options. "Boss, the doctor will be here in 15 minutes. At least let him patch you up before we move." Matteo relented, allowing us to ease him back into the chair. His hand found mine, gripping it with surprising strength. "Emma," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "If something happens to me, you run." You take the emergency passport and money in my safe, and you disappear. Promise me." The intensity in his eyes made it impossible to refuse. "I promise," I whispered. Though even as the words left my lips, I knew I had no intention of leaving him, or Sophia and Dante, behind. The next few hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. The doctor arrived, extracted the bullet from Matteo's shoulder, and administered enough painkillers to take the edge off without dulling his mind. Matteo made calls, issuing orders in rapid-fire Italian that I couldn't follow. Men I'd never seen before filled the penthouse, armed and dangerous, awaiting his command. Through it all, I stayed at his side, changing his bandages, forcing him to drink water, refusing to be relegated to the sidelines. If he was surprised by my stubbornness, he didn't show it, instead accepting my presence with a grim nod. "Enzo Conte is holding them at the old brewery on the east side," he finally announced, studying a map spread across his desk. "It's isolated, easily defended. He's expecting me to come." "It's a trap," Marco stated the obvious. "Of course it is," Matteo agreed. "Which is why we're not going to do what he expects." I listened as he outlined his plan, a two-pronged approach, with one team creating a diversion at the front, while a smaller team, led by Matteo himself, entered through a forgotten access tunnel that had once been used for Prohibition-era smuggling. "And me?" I asked when he'd finished. His expression hardened. "You stay here, under guard." "No," I said simply. Anger flashed in his eyes. "This isn't a negotiation, Emma. These men are killers." "So are you," I pointed out, "and you're injured. You need someone to watch your back who isn't also watching their own agenda." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "After what happened tonight, can you really trust everyone in this room? If Salvatore betrayed you, who else might have been turned?" The truth of my words registered in his eyes. He studied me for a long moment, then gave an almost imperceptible nod. "You stay behind me at all times," he said, his tone making it clear this was non-negotiable. "And you wear a vest." An hour later, I found myself in the back of an armored SUV, dressed in black tactical gear that Sophia had apparently kept on hand. "For emergencies," Matteo had explained, not quite meeting my eyes, a bulletproof vest strapped tightly across my chest. Matteo sat beside me, his face drawn with pain despite the medications, his good arm checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, as we neared our destination. "This isn't your fight." I thought about Sophia, who had treated me with surprising kindness. About Dante, whose brash exterior hid a vulnerability I'd glimpsed in unguarded moments. And about Matteo himself, this complex, dangerous man who had saved me, protected me, and slowly, inexorably drawn me into his world. "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with my certainty. "It is." The old brewery loomed against the night sky, a hulking shadow of brick and rusted metal. We approached on foot through a maze of abandoned warehouses, moving silently despite my inexperience. Matteo led our small team, just 4 of his most trusted men, himself and me, toward a rusted grate half hidden behind overgrown weeds. "Stay close," he murmured as one of his men worked to remove the grate. "If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments." I nodded, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. The tunnel beyond the grate was narrow and damp, the air thick with the smell of stagnant water and decay. We moved in single file, guided only by the narrow beam of a single flashlight. Above us, the sounds of gunfire erupted, the diversion team engaging Conte's guards. Matteo quickened his pace, his injured shoulder apparently forgotten in his urgency to reach his siblings. The tunnel eventually opened into a basement storage area, stacked with rotting wooden crates and rusted machinery. Matteo signaled for silence, listening intently. Voices filtered down from above, angry shouts in Italian, then a woman's cry of pain that could only be Sophia. Something dangerous flashed in Matteo's eyes. He issued silent commands to his men, who spread out toward various exits. To me, he simply pointed at a spot behind a stack of crates, clearly expecting me to stay put. I nodded, knowing that arguing now would only endanger everyone. They moved with practiced efficiency, disappearing up different staircases. I crouched behind the crates, straining to hear what was happening. More shouting. A single gunshot that made my blood freeze, then silence, more terrifying than the chaos that had preceded it. Unable to bear it any longer, I emerged from my hiding place, moving cautiously toward the nearest staircase. The steps creaked beneath my weight as I ascended, emerging into what had once been the main brewing floor. The vast space was dimly lit by scattered industrial lights, creating pools of illumination amid deep shadows. At the center of the room I saw them, Sophia and Dante, bound to chairs, battered but alive. Surrounding them were bodies, Conti's men, I presumed, taken down by Matteo's team. And standing before them, his back to me, was Matteo himself, his weapon trained on an older man who could only be Enzo Conte. "You've lost, Enzo," Matteo was saying, his voice carrying in the cavernous space. "Your men are dead or scattered. Surrender now, and I'll make it quick." Conte, a silver-haired man with the hard physique of someone who had fought his way to power, laughed mirthlessly. "You think this ends with me? Your own uncle betrayed you, Matteo. Your empire is crumbling from within." "My uncle made a miscalculation," Matteo replied coldly. "One he's already paid for." My blood chilled at the implication. Salvatore was dead then, killed by the nephew he had betrayed. "And now you'll join him," Matteo continued, raising his weapon. "Matteo, no!" Sophia cried. "Not like this." He hesitated, and in that moment, I saw movement in the shadows behind him, a figure emerging, weapon raised. Without thinking, I lunged forward. "Behind you!" I screamed. Matteo spun, firing as he turned. The hidden gunman's shot went wide as Matteo's found its mark. The man crumpled to the floor, but not before Conte seized the opportunity, drawing a concealed weapon of his own. Everything seemed to slow down. I saw Conte aim at Matteo's unprotected back, saw Matteo, still focused on the fallen gunman, unaware of the new threat, saw the desperate faces of Sophia and Dante, unable to warn their brother in time. My body moved of its own accord, muscle memory from that night at Antonio's propelling me forward. I slammed into Matteo just as Conte fired, the impact sending us both sprawling to the concrete floor. Pain blossomed in my side, hot and sharp despite the vest. As Matteo rolled, bringing his weapon to bear with lethal precision, 2 shots rang out, and Enzo Conte fell, his expression one of surprise rather than fear. "Emma!" Matteo was suddenly above me, his face contorted with panic as his hands pressed against my side. No, not again." I tried to speak, but found I couldn't catch my breath. Looking down, I saw blood seeping between his fingers, my blood bright against the black tactical gear. "The vest," I managed, confused. "The bullet found the gap," he said grimly. "Just hold on. We're getting you out of here." As darkness began to encroach on the edges of my vision, I was vaguely aware of being lifted, of Matteo's voice issuing urgent commands, of the warmth of his arms around me as he carried me from that place of death. His heartbeat, strong and steady against my cheek, was the last thing I remembered before the world went black. I woke to the now familiar scent of roses and the soft beeping of medical equipment, an echo of my first morning in Matteo's world that brought a strange sense of déjà vu. But this time, when I opened my eyes, I wasn't alone. Matteo sat beside the bed, his powerful frame folded uncomfortably in a chair that seemed too small to contain him. His head was bowed, his eyes closed, one hand wrapped around mine. He looked exhausted, stubble darkening his jaw, his injured shoulder heavily bandaged beneath a rumpled shirt. "We have to stop meeting like this," I murmured, my voice a rasping whisper. His head snapped up, those dark eyes flooding with relief. "Emma." Just my name, but filled with such emotion that it caught in my chest. "Sophia? Dante?" I asked, wincing as pain flared in my side when I tried to shift position. "Safe," he assured me. "Thanks to you." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. "You saved my life. Again." "Keeping score?" I attempted a smile. "Always." His expression grew serious. "The doctor says you were lucky. The bullet missed your vital organs by millimeters." "Doesn't feel lucky," I admitted, grimacing. "It will," he promised. "When you're fully recovered." A thought occurred to me. sending a jolt of anxiety through my body. Conte? His organization? Enzo is dead, Matteo confirmed. His son has taken control, but we've reached an understanding. A truce of sorts. The territory has been divided, boundaries established. His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. Peace through mutual deterrence. And Salvatore? Something dark flashed across Matteo's face. My uncle made his choice. He paid the price for betrayal. I should have been horrified, I knew. Should have recoiled from this casual confirmation of murder. Instead, I felt only a grim understanding. In Matteo's world, betrayal could not go unpunished. Family or not. So it's over? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. The immediate threat, yes. His grip on my hand tightened. But my world will never be completely safe, Emma. There will always be rivals, enemies, those who see me as standing in their way. I remembered our agreement that when the Conte threat was eliminated, I would be free to leave, to build a new life away from the danger and moral complexity of Matteo's world. The promise of freedom should have filled me with relief. Instead, I felt only a hollow emptiness at the thought of walking away. Our deal, I said quietly. You promised I could leave when this was over. A new identity, a fresh start. Pain flickered across his face, quickly masked. I remember, he said, his voice carefully neutral. If that's what you want, I'll honor our agreement. And if it's not what I want, hope blazed in his eyes so suddenly it took my breath away. Emma, he said, my name a caress on his lips. What are you saying? I took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in my side. I'm saying that I've spent my whole life being invisible, Matteo. Being nobody. Until that night at Antonio's, when I finally did something that mattered. I met his gaze steadily, and since then, I've been seen. Really seen. By you, by Sophia, even by Dante. I've done work that makes a difference at the foundation. I've found a purpose I never had before. My world is dangerous, he warned, though I could see the hope still burning in his eyes. Violent, morally complicated. I know, I acknowledged, and I'm not saying I approve of everything you do, but I understand it better now. The code you live by. The loyalty you show to those under your protection. I squeezed his hand. I don't want to go back to being invisible, Matteo, and I don't want to run away to become someone else, somewhere else. What do you want? He asked, echoing the question he'd asked me weeks ago in his penthouse. This time I knew the answer with absolute certainty. I want to stay. With you. With this strange, dangerous family I've somehow become part of. I want to continue working at the foundation, doing good with whatever resources are available, regardless of their origin. I met his gaze steadily. I want to be by your side, Matteo. Not as a prisoner or a protected asset, but as a partner. For a moment he seemed frozen, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Then he leaned forward, his free hand coming up to cup my face with impossible gentleness. I've been alone my entire life, even surrounded by family, he said, his voice rough with emotion, until you. This remarkable woman who took a bullet for a stranger, who saw something in me worth saving, when I'd long since given up on redemption. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. I love you, Emma Collins. I think I have since that first night, when you looked at me with no fear in your eyes, only determination to protect a life you deemed worthy, not knowing what darkness that life contained. I know what darkness it contains now, I said softly. I've seen it, but I've also seen the light in you, Matteo. The loyalty, the honor, however unconventional, the capacity for love. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. Stay with me, he whispered. Be my strength, my conscience, my heart. In answer, I closed the distance between us, my lips finding his in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. His mouth was warm and certain against mine, the kiss deepening with a hunger that spoke of weeks of restraint, finally breaking. When we parted, both breathless, I saw in his eyes a future I never could have imagined for myself, one filled with danger and passion, complexity and purpose. A life at the side of a man who had once been a stranger I'd impulsively saved, and who had become the center of my world. "I'll stay," I promised. "For as long as you want me." His smile, rare and genuine, transformed his face, softening the hard edges, revealing the man beneath the carefully constructed armor. "Then prepare for forever, Emma Collins," he said, sealing the promise with another kiss. "Because I'm never letting you go." Outside the window of our bedroom, the city stretched out before us, a landscape of light and shadow, of danger and possibility. But here, in the circle of Mateo's arms, I had finally found where I belonged. Not as a nobody, not as a victim, but as the woman who had saved a dangerous man's life, and in doing so, had saved her own.